Hello, thank you for tuning into Town Meeting TV's ongoing coverage of elections. We are into March 4th election. That's town meeting when we will vote on local budgets, ballot items, select boards, school board candidates, and bond and ballot items. My name is Megan O'Rourke, and I'm the host of tonight's forum. These forums are made possible by Town Meeting TV's generous underwriting partners. And you can find this forum and others like it at cctv.org/TMD2025 or on the Town Meeting TV YouTube channel, which you can find by going to youtube.com/TownMeetingTV. On tonight's program, we're going to hear from representatives from the Winooski School Board as well as the Winooski School Superintendent and hear about the proposed budget that's in front of voters, as well as you're going to be speaking about any of the other items on the ballot, or mainly the school board budget. Great, thanks. And if you could just introduce yourself, I'm with Kamal Dahal, Robert Millar,
Wilmer Chavarria.
Great. Yeah, so.
Hello. Hello, everyone. My name is Kamal Dahal. I am a Winooski School Board member since 2021, and I'm back here again this year, bringing the budget presentation for upcoming fiscal year 25-26. Robert?
I'm Robert Millar. I'm the president of the school board. I was elected in 23, so I'm up again this year. This is my second go around on the board, having been on the board about 10 years ago previously.
Thanks. I'm Wilmer Chavarria. I'm the superintendent of schools for the Winooski School District. Happy to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, welcome. So you have a presentation to walk us through, and of course, if you have calls, 862-3966. That's 802-862-3966, and you can call if you have any specific questions as well. Who's going to get us started with the presentation tonight?
All right, I can go first, and then we can go.
However you like.
All right, so the FY26 budget for Winooski was another ride through a lot of confusing moving parts. We knew that last year was a difficult time for us because in addition to Act 127 kicking in, we also had a citywide reappraisal, which made it very difficult for us to predict the tax impact on the taxpayers given our budget. This year we didn't have a citywide reappraisal, but there were still other moving pieces about this. Like, for example, the way weights were being calculated about some students changed, and so that affected our data a little bit. But we're gonna go one thing at a time, and we can begin with how we begin our budgeting. And I'll invite Kamal to talk about our end statement as a school district.
Yeah, every year we present that this end statement as our second slide because this is our mission and our vision. And it's very important for all the board members to understand our work based on this statement. This was formulated with community involvement back in 2012, and it's worth reading it out loud for folks who are not able to see this. So all students will graduate from the Winooski School District, college and career ready, at a cost supported by the majority of the Winooski community. Winooski School District students will lead healthy, productive, and successful lives and engage with their local and global community. And this is the promise that we have to our community. And as you can see, the second line, it says costs supported by a community, and that's precisely why we are here. We have adopted a budget, and we wanted to present that budget to the community so they can make an informed decision when they go out and vote for our budget.
Great, thank you.
Right. Yeah, and I can talk about this slide, but before we get into that, I just want to follow up on what Kamal was just saying, starting with why we have an end statement instead of a mission vision statement or something along those lines. Is we're a policy governance board, which means primarily our work is around policy. And as a policy governance board, we start every policy looking back at this end statement instead of a mission or vision, though they're very comparable. Is that it? Yeah. Yeah. So moving along the presentation, you can see this is going to. A lot of these things are going to look very confusing because last year something called Act 127 came into effect, which changed how students are weighted in the statewide education formula. So it's not that, if you look at this, it looks like our population just doubled, but what changed is how much different types of students are weighted. And it changed from what was called equalized per pupil to weighted long-term membership. Basically, it just increased the weights for certain students, such as multilingual learners, students experiencing poverty, students in rural areas, and obviously those first two affect Winooski greatly. So this made last year's budget very, very confusing even for us as we worked through it. We were also going through a reappraisal, as Wilmer talked about last time.
So this chart is showing that these are the number of students that you had up until.
No, so these are.
Explain the chart to us.
So we actually have what, 799 now?
About 780.
789, if I can just jump in. Until 2023-24, the number of students we had was lower than that, but we were getting funding from the state as if we have 900 students. That's the cost required. If we were to split the budget evenly among all the students' head count, even though our students' head count would be lower, the actual cost, because of the different needs for the students' demographic composition, it would have cost us as if we're educating 900 students.
Yeah. So the blue line is the first year weighting takes place.
And that was when we had the previous formula, which was not equitable. Our former board member, Alexine, when he came here, we had a very extensive conversation about how that was impacting our district at that time. And with the change in the new long-term weighted formula, they just changed the term, but they changed the formula and the calculation metrics for that. And that rose that count to 2167 last year. It's just the state understood that the cost needed to educate our students because of all the unique needs that exist within our town, a very diverse, one of the most diverse town in the entire state, was 2167, and that has changed to 2005 for this next year.
Got it.
Yeah, and we're still getting used to this in some ways. It's a weighted long-term average membership too, so that plays into, it's like a 2-year cycle. So, it took a while to get a number from the state this year as we tried to go through our budget process to get a number that we could work with, which is important because we're not just looking at a budget, but how that budget affects the taxpayer. But to figure that out is a long formula that you kind of need to have at least had Calculus 1 to really understand. Unfortunately, at this point, it's gotten that complicated. And as I think I alluded to before the beginning of the show, they made it even a little more complicated with legislation last year. But
so are you saying they're going to do this? Can they do this calculation on a year-by-year basis, or they're going to do it over for a 2-year basis?
It's based on a 2-year rolling average. So this is like this year and last year to get to this number. So
we can keep.
Absolutely, we could spend way too much time on just that. Do you want me to keep going?
Yeah. Take turns.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so this we think is important to share with folks too as we get into talking about the budget, because two things here. We're seeing a projected decrease in student population over the next 10 years, much like many districts, which is a change for us over just a few years ago, when we're one of the few districts seeing an increase year over year. But in a positive sign, the projection this year was much better, the orange one, as opposed to last year we were looking at the blue one and thinking we'd have nearly half as many students in a decade. So it may be that things are evening out a little bit. It may be that because we invested in our pre-K, so we have more students there. But so we're dealing with the reality of the decrease, but hopefully not as bad as we were worried about last year. And now we should move to somebody else.
I'm curious on that line. Do you have any sense of how many students who live in Winooski but are educated outside of the Winooski School District?
Outside of the public schools?
Yeah.
We could take a guess, but we don't, for many reasons, it's hard to keep track.
Yeah.
We could say how many we are paying tuition for in one way or another for special education or things like that. And it's a very small number of students, yes.
Right. Sorry, thanks.
No, that's a good question.
These are the factors that play the biggest, that have the biggest weight in the weighting. So the way the formula works right now is, just to answer your previous question, the numbers that you saw in yellow before, or brown, they were also weighted in a way. They were equalized. They don't represent the actual number of pupils. They had the values changed depending on the need as well. It's just that for Winooski that was very inequitable because we had a lot more need than we were getting resources for. And that's why you saw that large jump. All districts in the state saw an inflation, so you saw a jump for everybody. This wasn't unique for Winooski when you see the blue. So everybody's blue bars went up. But for a place like Winooski, they went up by more because we had more English learners and students living in poverty and other weights. So these are some of the trends of those needs. Students living in poverty, students who qualify for multilingual services, students in a special education program, or students on IEPs. And we see a trend. Our multilingual learners are harder to quantify. The measures keep getting a little confusing. Again, this is not us alone. This is the way the state does things. So it looks like we have less multilingual learners, but there are caveats to all that. The trend line for students living in poverty and the way we measure it as well keeps going up. And it would be higher if it wasn't because the ways in which we qualify students for this measure keeps changing. And it keeps looking like it's lower than it actually is.
Here, this shows the trend in our actual homestead tax after the long, complicated formula. So folks actually, with the change in weights, saw a decrease. You can see there was a pretty significant increase over the previous 5 or so years, and that was, the prior board anticipating that we were going to get there, we were going to get the state to make changes, but we needed to make investments in the students there, who were there at the time. And you can see then with the change in weights that actual tax rate dropped significantly for folks, about 90 cents. However, because of the reappraisal, many people saw the value of their property, in many cases more than double. So we've calculated, I think, about half single-family homeowners saw an increase of 11% or more, despite their actual tax rate dropping significantly. So that's something we had in the back of our mind through this whole budgeting process, that even despite this decrease, people saw a pretty significant increase again last year. So we didn't necessarily want to repeat that if we could avoid it.
And just to explain to the folks, when we look at the tax rate calculations, there are multiple variables in there. There's only one variable that we have a sole control over, which is determining the actual budget. The rest of the variables, that's the CLA, the home values.
It's the common level of appraisal.
Yes, sorry. Yeah,
That's
common
okay.
level of appraisal. And those are external things that we don't have a direct control over. And it's hard to make that kind of prediction because those things changes too. Even while we are going out and presenting that, because there's a lot of variables that could change even after today's presentation. It's hard for us to give a more precise figure on whether an average taxpayer's dollar amount would go up or down. And that has been a very tricky thing for us presenting the budget, because people want to know ultimately whether they are going to have to pay more or not to make that decision. But unfortunately, because of the complexities that exist in the whole formula, it's very hard for us to make that. But we kind of have a sense of what can happen, and that's what we present every year.
Yeah. Yeah, so not to get ahead of ourselves, but this is what we're anticipating
Yes.
as a 1 cent decrease with the numbers we currently have from the state and the budget that we approved. Which the budget that we had approved would, this would result in a equalized pupil or long-term weighted average. Remember, it changed with Act 127, so that's why there's two different things. What used to be called equalized pupil is now the long-term weighted average. So this is not per actual student, but per equalized, or per average.
Yep.
Got it. You followed it?
Yep.
Okay.
Well,
Hopefully,
I'm following.
hopefully at least some of the people at home followed what I was saying. So you'll see there was a significant drop with the Act 127 and the reappraisal, but there will be an increase with the budget that we're passing per pupil, or per weighted pupil.
So, yeah, tell us a little bit about that. I mean, I think we want to get to the place where people want to know we have the budget number, what's going to be the impact?
Yeah, so you're going to see like Robert said, a 1 cent likely decrease in your tax rate. So you're going to see a bit of a decrease if things continue to be the way they are. So tax rates are not going to increase. So chances are your actual taxes are not going to increase either, because your home value is not changing as far as the reappraisal. Yeah, the education tax. The graph that you're seeing shows an increase in per long-term weighted membership spending. That is higher than it actually is. This is almost not quite artificial, but an inflated number, a more inflated jump than it actually reflects, because our real increase of the budget is 4.13%. But this jump in spending per pupil shows a 13% increase. So how did we go from a 4% increase that is way below level services? Level services would have been a 7%, meaning giving students and programs. We actually reduced staff.
Services.
We reduced services, we reduced staff, so that we could keep it below that 7%, and we achieved that 4%. Yet our spending per pupil,
close to the
just
cost
above
of living.
Just above inflation in New England. Yet our increase per pupil looks as though it's at 13%. And that's because of a previous slide that it showed that we went from having 2,167 weighted pupils down to 2,005. That's a loss of 160. And you wonder, that means you have less students this year. And the truth is we actually have more students this year. But the way in which the state calculated the weights this year actually changed. And I don't want to bore our viewers, so I'm not going to go into that. But that jump in the per pupil spending that you're seeing right now, it's hard to sell to our community, because it doesn't really reflect, one, the changes in taxes, because your taxes are likely decreasing, and two, the real increase in our budget, which is a lot lower than that.
So your budget shouldn't be that hard to sell, because you're telling folks, we're actually spending less, except let's talk about the things that you've had to cut. I think you call them compromises, and the things that you're able to sustain with this budget.
Yeah, and I just want to say one more thing about this, because one of the difficulties now from the state is they've changed the language that goes on the ballot. So the ballot's going to say that our per pupil spending went up 13%. Well, we're sitting here talking about a budget that went up just over 4%.
So you have some education to do in the community.
So we really want to continue to have that conversation with folks about that 4%, about this 1 cent decrease, those sorts of things. Do we want to go through all of these things?
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
I just wanted to point out that if we go back because it's very important to explain this slide, because this slide's data exist on the ballot that people vote into, and a lot of folks that I have spoken informally outside have assumed this is cost of educating per students.
13% more, yeah.
And people are like, okay, you've decreased your budget, but why are you increasing per pupil spending? It's just that the other chart that we saw a couple slides earlier here, I think this one.
Nope,
No,
the wrong one.
this one.
Yeah.
It's in this. If this goes down, if the number goes down here, the actual cost goes up. There's an inverse relationship
Yeah.
with that. And because the funding formula determines that number of the students weighted count, it also impacts this number, and that number is on the ballot.
Yeah, and I hate to skip over some of these slides, which are important, but I want to get to this.
Well, and you can also tell folks how to find more information about
Oh
this.
yeah,
and
so
there's
this is
another
on the
presentation as well.
website under.
Yeah, in our school board, the school board corner of the website has a page specific to all things budget. So you can find all of these documents right there.
Yeah. You can find video of all 7 meetings we had around the budget. You can
Yes.
find all the different presentations we had as well as this final one. But yeah, I just wanted to get to this slide where we have that big number up front. You can see that 4.13% increase, and you can see what you were talking about, the compromises. So, you know, there's a lot of rhetoric thrown around in the state around spending being out of control. The problem, though, really, most of the time is costs. It's not that there are a lot of boards out there just spending. It's that we come into each budget session and we have things like 12% increase in health insurance, which is the 3rd year in a row with double-digit
low
increases.
compared to other places, but honestly,
Yeah, you know, we have negotiated salary increases. For us, we have things related to the capital project. We vastly improved our school after decades of neglect, and we have costs associated with that. We need to create a new debt reserve fund in regards to that. We had unexpected drop in the Idea B grant. We were anticipating over 300,000, and that's not going to be there. So we have to absorb that because Idea B is something from the federal government that we have to do, whether they give us money to do it or not. It's one of those classic unfunded mandates. So that's $300,000 we have to absorb. So we had all these things going in that we had to absorb. And we looked at a budget that was 7.2%. So that would be just absorbing these. And we said, we need to find something else. And that's where we get to these compromises. Do you want to talk about that? Or?
Yeah, so we knew that if we wanted to, you know, make some reductions because we had to. There was only so much our Winooski voters could take, and probably it was going to be a harder sell if we were going to increase taxes, especially by a lot. And so we try to find the things that could have the least impact on the educational services that we provide, while at the same time giving us some savings. We managed to find about $1.5 million in savings, including some one-time spending that we did this year that we could reduce as well. But we also did close to $1 million in reduction of actual services that exist in this moment, and the reduction in staff members, both licensed staff and support staff. And some of that are some of the most painful things to do when you have actual people, actual team members in our schools that we're not expecting to leave their job. They will probably love their employment there. But this is some of the compromises a lot of our districts across the state are making. And although that's not what people think of Winooski, because a lot of people tend to blame Winooski for some of this. They think Winooski is getting all this extra funding. The truth is we're on the same boat. We're also having to make reductions. We're also having to make some compromises.
And you know, when we look at this slide, one of the things that as a board member I keep reminding myself is the first slide that I talked about, the end statement. There's 2 aspects to that, right? We have a promise to our community to make sure our students get the best education they can receive. But the other aspect is we want to make sure our budget passes and the cost of educating our students is supported by a majority of our voters. Mm-hmm. And last year, you know, the voters, even though we went out to the voters presenting that there is a significant increase in the students count with the changed formula, there's a lot of things that happened from a voter's point of view, the common level of approval that changes. And also with a lot of funding that we had through a federal government, like one was the Emergency Relief Fund that was used to for a lot of services that were essential to our district. That got cut off, that expired. So we had to absorb all of those positions. So people ended up paying, and people were generous enough to do that. And this year we're trying to compromise on that. So we want to make sure our voters and our residents, the taxpayers, continue to support us, while also making sure our students continue to receive the education. So all the compromises that we made were done with ensurement from our superintendent that it would have very least amount of educational impact.
So just sort of like a summary now. We have about 3 minutes left. It sounds like your budget is going up from last year to this year by 4%.
Yep.
And that the impact on the taxpayers will be decreased possibly by
About a penny
about a penny
on the tax rate.
on the tax rate. And I don't know if you have a quick slide just to show us that.
This shows
Impact.
sort of summarizes some
Great,
of that,
thanks.
1 cent, and
And if you have a quick slide to show us the impact on a homeowner as well?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
there you go.
Here.
And maybe just explain that. I don't know if you know what the average home price in Winooski
the average
is?
home price jumped actually from the bottom of this to about the 450 mark, if I'm remembering correctly. It was significant. Average single-family home, I would say. So, luckily this year we don't have any. We had a big complicated thing last year where we tried to anticipate people's reappraisals and where they, I don't know if you're here and your value, but we don't have to worry about this.
So it looks like a relatively flat either
Pretty-
decrease or increase in that.
It should be,
Yep.
with the numbers we have now from the state, it should be a decrease for
Decrease, yeah.
everybody. And that includes for folks who pay based on their income, which is also important because a lot of families in Winooski still pay based, if you make less than $128,000 a year, you pay at least partially based on income.
Correct, yeah. So that first slide shows what the tax impact will be, and then you either will get a
Yeah.
Rebate.
rebate. Thank you so much. Any final comments or thoughts that you want to share with the voters about what you're doing with the school?
Yeah, sure. I want to say Winooski schools are a vibrant place. If anybody comes in, we usually get these comments about how inspiring it is to be in there, how obvious it is that the community cares about their children and the future of Vermont. Our staff are the most amazing you can find anywhere in the world. We feel very proud of the work that we're doing, and I think education in Winooski is worth every penny.
I'll echo all of that, and also just say if folks want more information, want to question us to our face, we've got another presentation in 2 weeks on February 4th at the O'Brien Center. I believe it starts at 4, but we'll be there until 6:30 or so. So.
And will there be translation at that,
Uh,
available at that, or?
I'm not sure. The city was taking the lead on that one. I
All right.
think so. If folks, sorry.
For most, not all of our events, we guarantee translation.
Yeah,
and
we do.
I'm pretty sure for that one we'll have.
Okay, good,
Thank you.
good.
Yeah.
I didn't want to say the wrong
I
thing.
don't know how long time we have, maybe 30 seconds left.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to take this opportunity to really thank CCTV for this opportunity. I think it's very important, the work that you guys do, for us to be able to bring this to a wider community. So if anybody missed out on this, there's going to be more presentation. And as your representative, we are always there to answer questions, so it doesn't even have to be on that presentation. Feel free to email us at any time. And if, pose your question, comments, feedbacks, we are always ready to answer. That's our job.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you for the work that you do and the service you give to your community. And thank you all for watching, for tuning in to Town Meeting TV's ongoing election coverage. Again, you can catch this and other forums like it at cctv.org, TMD 2025. Thanks for watching, and don't forget, you can vote on March 4th, or you can contact your clerk and figure out how to vote before Election Day. Be well, and good night.